Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar Traffic Incident Management Benefit Cost Tool Potential Improvements. My name is Nilu Parvinashtani and I'll be helping with facilitating today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration and hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, also known as NOCO. I just wanted to share a few logistical items for today's webinar before we get started. First of all, we are not planning to release the recording and the slides for this webinar on NOCO website at this time. Also, I wanted to share that all attendee phones are on listen-only mode by default, but please stay engaged through using the question discussion pod that you see for any comments or questions during the call. We have several engagement activities planned throughout the webinar, and also have dedicated some time at the end for Q&A. So, if any questions come to your mind during the presentations, just put them in the question pod, and we'll make sure to read that out loud one at a time and pose it to our panel of speakers. Alternatively, if you'd like to expand on your comment or question on the phone, you need to use the raise hand option that you see on the top right side of your screen, and then press *6 to unmute yourself on the phone. You're welcome to use both, the chat option that I discussed earlier and then this phone option. We'll send that instructions in the chat also, so you know what the code is for unmuting. And that is the end of my items with the logistics. With that, I would like to hand it over to our moderator for today, Stephen Wu, to start us off. Stephen.
Thank you, Nilu. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Vu. I'm a communications specialist with Leidos, and I'll be helping to moderate today's workshop. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers. With us today, we have Paul Joden, Traffic Incident Management Program Manager with the Federal Highway Administration. We also have Yingyan Liu, Associate Professor at Arizona State University and Visiting Scholar at FHWA Saxton Transportation Operations Laboratory, and Sujit Racha, Program Manager at the Saxton Lab, overseeing the Cooperative Driving Automation Program. Additionally, before we get started, I'd like to ask everyone attending to please put their name and affiliation in the chat pod. For this workshop, we'll be using Google Jamboard, and we'll have a quick walkthrough of the tool at the beginning of the presentation. And with that, I'll hand it over to Sujit to get us started.
Thank you, Stephen, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sujit Racha, and like Stephen mentioned, I'm managing the Cooperative Driving Automation program, which is being operated in Saxton Transportation Operations Lab. Today, the tool that we are going to discuss, Traffic Incident Management Benefit Cost Tool, is coming out of a project to provide solutions to the transportation system management and operations. So this is a second webinar on the topic. We have done an initial webinar back in November to collect some industry feedback, and some of you might have already attended that webinar. The intent today is to go through some potential improvements and seek additional feedback from you all. Before we dive into the information, I want to start off with a disclaimer that this presentation was created and is being co-presented by both Federal Highway Administration and the contractor. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of FHWA or the USDOT. The contents do not necessarily reflect the official policy of the USDOT. The US government does not endorse products or manufacturers, trademarks, or manufacturers' names appear in this presentation only because they are considered essential to the objective of the presentation. They are included for informational purposes only and are not intended to reflect a preference, approval, or endorsement of any one product or entity. With that, I would like to give an overview or provide an agenda on how the topics will be covered today. We will start with the project overview, and we will talk about traffic incident management benefit cost tool stakeholder inputs. We'll gather needs and use cases for the TIM-BC tool and other similar tools that are available through various agencies that you might be using. And we will also discuss about the traffic incident management strategies supported by the TIM-BC tools, which are in relevance of the TIM strategies incorporated by the TIM-BC tool and needs for incorporating additional TIM strategies such as next-gen TIM strategies and CDA technologies. And we'll also discuss about the usability of the TIM-BC tool, and we'll be talking about data needs and data feeds. Finally, going through the benefit cost estimation methodologies. So this was intended to be an interactive workshop / webinar, and we plan on using a whiteboarding tool, which is Jamboard, that I would like Stephen to provide an overview on how to use the Jamboard. With that, Stephen.
Thanks, Sujit. So you can access the Google Jamboard using the link under useful links. It's number 1. Pulling up right now on the screen. Awesome. So we just have a very simple icebreaker question and a prompt to make a check mark on the screen to make sure everyone knows how to use it. Looks like a couple of people have already started, so that's great. So I'll just quickly walk everyone how to use the tool. So to place a sticky note, which is primarily what you'll be using in the webinar to answer our questions, there's a square icon in the left-hand menu of your screen, which is the 4th option from the top. Once you click that icon, a prompt will come up for you to type in your response, and once you're ready to post it on the screen, hit the save button and automatically will put it on the board. If you want to keep typing and put more answers on, you can keep typing, but once you're done, just hit cancel and it will take you back to the main board. And from there, you can drag your sticky note by clicking on it and moving it around. And if you want to resize it, you can click on your sticky note and then drag the bottom right-hand corner to resize it as needed. If you want to make changes to your sticky note, just double-click it, and then that same prompt will pop up, and you can edit the text from there, and then hit save to save the changes. To make the check marks, we're going to ask you to use the pen tool, which is the top option on that left-hand menu. You can change the pen type and color, but for the purposes of our webinar, you won't need to do anything too fancy like that. So just the default one will be fine. And then once you click that pen tool, your mouse cursor will change to a black dot, and you can now draw on the board. And if you want to get out of the pen tool, you can select the mouse cursor icon, which is the 3rd option from the top on that left-hand menu. And you can also see at the top of the screen where it says 1 out of 10, there are arrows where you can navigate between the different slides. So if we go past the question, but you still have more you want to say, you can go back to previous questions and continue your answer from there. Feel free to continue playing around with the tool on the first page while we go through the first few introductory slides. And if you have any questions about Jamboard, feel free to put them in the chat pod. And with that, I'll hand it over back to Ying Yan.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, thank you everybody for joining our webinar / workshop today. My name is Ying-Yan Lo. I am an associate professor at the Arizona State University and also a visiting scholar at Saxton Transportation Operations Lab. I am leading the investigation here on improvements to the TIM-BC tool. And thank you for everyone who's participating in the Jamboard right now. And I can see that blue is dominating, or at last I checked. And that's wonderful because my favorite color is also blue. So I'll be providing some overview of the project first before handing over to our different speakers. Paul, Sujit, and myself will be leading the discussions as Sujit has laid out in the agenda. So this project is really to improve the TIM-Busy tool, a tool which was developed a few years ago through FHWA's Office of Research, Development, and Technology under the Office of Operations. And the goal for this current project is to improve the tool, make the tool more useful to the TIM community and other relevant communities such as researchers and maybe developers. The objectives include raise awareness of the tool among relevant communities, identify and prioritize potential improvements to the tool, which is what this workshop is about, and of course facilitate constant engagement among users, researchers, and developers. In order to do so, we have been engaging stakeholders. As Ajit has mentioned, we had our first webinar back in December, and hopefully many of you have attended the webinar. The December webinar is posted, in fact, through NOCO and on YouTube, so it's available to view with good information about how to use the tool and the methodologies behind the tools. We are also making the tool open source, and of course to come with the open source tool, there is a complete set of updated documentation for everyone's reference. The source code is already published. The documentation is published on a new Confluence space. And in fact, in the useful links section here on the top right corner of your screen, in addition to the Google Jamboard, which is what we're using today, you will see 3 additional links. The first one, or the second link, which is the second out of the 4, the TIM-BC software, will lead you to the download page of the TIM-BC software tool itself. The next link is the source code. If anyone is interested in further developing the tool, or learn about under the engine of the tool, that's the source code, and all of our documentations and discussion space are on Confluence, which is the last link in the useful links box. So with that, I'm going to provide a quick overview of the tool to hopefully jog some memories about the tool, and then we'll start getting into the stakeholder input sections. So here you're seeing a screenshot of the main page of the TIM-BC tool. The tool is to provide benefit and cost estimation for a range of TIM strategies, and it is capable of evaluation of the monetary value of TIM programs, and it will provide monetary value of travel delay, fuel consumption, emissions, and secondary incidents. The tool is designed to be very simple to use. Its data requirements are less intense compared to other tools and previous generations of the tool. The estimation methodologies behind the scene are universal across these team strategies. So the intended usage for this TIM-BC tool include assessing proposed expansion or of existing TIM programs, or creating new TIM programs with a benefit cost analysis, and of course compare alternatives. So that's a very quick overview. I'm going to hand over back to Sujit to start our user stakeholder discussion. The first topic will be the needs and use cases for the TIM-BC tool and other similar tools.
Great. Thank you, Yin Yan. Yeah, like Yin Yan said, we would like to collect the needs and use cases for the TIM-BC tool. If not this tool, any other similar tool that you all might have used or are using through a different agency to evaluate the benefit cost of traffic incident management strategy. So with that, I'll be reading out the first question and going back to the Jamboard here so that we could capture your feedback here. So have you used or heard about this tool that we are discussing today, Federal Highways TIM-BC tool, or any other similar tools for TIM-BC analysis before? If so, what are those tools? Feel free to add your sticky notes onto the Jamboard so that we capture your feedback. Good. I see that I've used the TOPS BC tool. Fair enough. Heard about it, but never used it. That's good. Hopefully this webinar would give you some outline on the tool available here. Okay. So we are receiving some responses that they heard about the tool, but have not used it. That's good. So capture your thoughts on how you would like to use these, because that would be your next question after this question, so that we could capture that information as well. I've used the CalBC tool, mostly focusing on planning. Okay, that's good to hear. Well, the other tools that I am aware of, which are similar to this one, the CalBC one, which is already in here, and there is IDAS and impact tools that have been developed by Federal Highway in the past. Highway Economic Requirements System State version that was also developed by Federal Highway. So any of those tools, if you have used, please go ahead and type in your feedback. I've heard of TOPS BC and TIM-BC, but not used yet. Okay. Have used the TIM-BC tool. That's good. We have a user here. That's great. We have also used VisSim to model multiple lane closure to simulate an incident and determine the amount of delay to expect. It's great using simulation tools to determine the delay. That's a good way as well.
Also, if you see any response that's already on the Jamboard and you are in the same boat, can simply put a check mark next to the sticky note instead of typing your own. That way we could also collect feedback in terms of getting a feel of where the community is at in terms of percentage of users being aware of different types of tools.
Great. Thanks for that, Jean. Yeah, that's helpful rather than typing or retyping the same feedback again, so we can capture multiple interests on the same, same observation here. Okay, we have some users who have seen and used this tool. Oh, that's great. And if you can put in one or two applications that you have used in the past, that will be helpful as well, just to get the context on where you have used. SSB, but not extensively. Okay, fair enough. That's great. You all can keep chiming in some of the input as we move forward as well. But to make sure that we capture all the content from the webinar, I'm um, moving to the next question here. Okay. So would like to check with you all, what are your thoughts on performance metrics versus BC analysis? Is there a need? Is there a really need for a BC analysis beyond reporting performance metrics? And if so, how? You can use the right arrow to jump to the next question on your Jamboard. We are on slide 3 of 10 of the Jamboard, second question. Okay, we see that performance metrics and benefit cost analysis are synonyms within the MPO world. Okay. I see multiple interests there that the BC analysis would be helpful to support performance metric to help determine the funding. Okay, that's the primary use. I good with that. If I agree, the performance metrics are used for project need identification, but BC is prioritizing the investment decision here. So what I'm grabbing from you all here is, performing BC analysis is important. There is a distinct benefit for both performance metrics and BC analysis, and BC analysis is used beyond just reporting performance metrics, and majority of the answers are leading to the funding requirements or investment decisions here. Okay, you guys have been super interactive here. That's great.
Well, in fact, this makes me curious as to how often is BC tool typically needed if the main use case here is for program selection and funding justification.
I also see that BC tool is very important to the highway safety patrol program, to management and legislators. Okay. Would like to know how often do you guys use the tool, for the patrol program. Is it based on the event or a scenario or a project? Okay. You can keep recording your feedback while I move to the next part of the presentation. So we'll go back to the slide again on talking about the relevance of the TIM strategies and TIM strategies incorporated in the TIM BC tool. So we have Paul here to provide some overview on that. Paul?
Hey, thank you, and thanks everybody for joining us today to try to figure out what our next steps is. We don't have a huge budget for this, so what we're going to be able to do with this is somewhat limited. So it's not unlimited, but so the 8 strategies that we came up with. So this whole benefit cost strategy came about. Excuse me. Of course, I get a frog in my throat when it's my turn to speak. There was a hit on service patrols a few years ago that some of you may remember. Maybe it wasn't more than a few years ago, maybe, I don't know, between 5 and 7 years ago. And it will continue that anytime the budget people want to cut something, service patrols are always vulnerable because they're looked at by the some unknowing folks that the budget people and legislatures and things like that may not be fully aware of the benefits of a service patrol. For example, a nice little thing that changes tires and provides gasoline when you run out of gas. We all know that it's more than that. So it started that way, so we can have a defense when they try to take the service patrol programs away. Basically the same, when the researchers were talking to us, they said, well, we can use the same methodology for other aspects of a TIM program. And so we came up with the list that you see below. And they might, they may not have been the right strategies then, and they may not be the right strategies now, but we have an opportunity to change. I think the legislation, for example, I think we might either put it all into one legislation tool, or maybe we can change it up. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Maybe there's more important strategies that are readily measured or justifiable strategies that we want to go to. I would say that, from my perspective, the service patrols and the training are the most important, but well, not necessarily the most important, but are easily measurable, because the TIM task force to me is a big deal as well, as many of you know. And so question 3: are the 8 strategies still relevant today to the TIM, to you guys, to the TIM community? You are the TIM community, by the way. So in Yin Yang and Singh, I can't read the answers as they go in. I can't read that small. So if you guys want to copy things, but I see everyone's just checking it off there. So.
Well, I see a lot of check marks on the Safety Service Patrol.
Yeah.
Sharp training coming in, and pre-established towing service agreements, getting some check marks. And I see the image just being moved, but actually the image is not loading on my end. If it is the case for any participant, the shared screen actually shows the image loading, which is good.
I can see the check marks. Yeah, it looks like driver removal laws doesn't get a lot of. Oh, we just got a vote there. Authority removal laws has a few. The goals to me are a little bit more difficult, but yeah, having some goals. Okay. All right, well, I'm glad you guys all recognize that all these strategies are important, but are they the most important? So I think maybe if you, like Yin Yang, go to the next page, we'll go to the next page and ask that question. Is that right? Yeah, so,
next,
yeah.
the next section is actually talking about, are we seeing maybe some new strategies that the TIM-BC tool should support? And we are seeing two categories of possible new TIM strategies. One is the next-gen TIM strategies that have already been in the discussion in the TIM community for a while. And Paul will be providing some background if you're not very familiar with them. And the second group of potential new strategies to include are will have more cooperative driving automation involved. And I will talk a little bit more about that when the time comes. So I see a lot of participants are already putting check marks in the next question, number 4. Please go ahead and do so. And please continue recording your answers for questions 1 to 3 while Paul provides a very brief overview on the next-gen TIM strategies. So we're going to go back to the slides.
All yours again.
Okay, I think we, so the next-gen TIM, the strategies for those of you, if there are anybody that's not familiar with it. So next-gen TIM is the Everyday Counts program, Everyday Counts 6, and we are focused, we selected certain aspects of TIM. As you know, there's a lot of tentacles to a holistic TIM program, but we really wanted to focus on local roads. So, you know, make sure that everyone understands that TIM for arterials and in rural jurisdictions is still appropriate and applicable. But we wanted to also include the TIM training program that we continue to push. You know, the interagency, you know, the same thing we do at like a statewide TIM task force or the regional task forces. There's task force all over the country. You know, those interagency agreements and policies, procedures, you know, the different elements that we see at the state program, we want it more at the local level. So, you know, you can say, I won't read that last slide to you, but there's various programs that are focused at the local level, arterials, if you will, for example. Another aspect is continue to advance the TIM data collection, analysis, and use, video sharing, either from, we were initially focusing on from responder vehicle to traffic management center and back and forth. So we're trying to push that through our Everyday Counts initiative. We're also one of the technologies that we're pushing for technologies. When I say pushing, we're trying to facilitate advancing those technologies within state and local governments, mostly DOTs and other responder communities. But unmanned aircraft systems, for TIM in particular, we know that they are increasingly emerging as a extremely beneficial tool for us to use. They're becoming widely used by law enforcement at crash scenes to do the crash investigation, all the measurements that need to do with considerable benefit cost to that. But we don't have a lot of data. Only a few locations are actually collecting data. Most of it is analytical, but we do see this potential benefit is significant there, reducing crash reconstruction time, which everyone knows is a big problem when they close the road for hours and hours to take these measurements. But we're also seeing emerging some other uses for TIM, situational awareness, incident verification, monitoring traffic, end of queue monitoring, and various other applications with using UAS. And that to me, that's the most exciting part, is that UAS is really, we're really seeing some people buy into it. So. Next question is, would your organization be interested in benefit cost estimates of any of the next gen TIM strategies? Do you think that's appropriate? And I just want to qualify this, keep it in mind, because everyone's checking everything, because everything's important. But I don't know that we'll have more than 8 strategies. So we're going to have to figure out if, what we have before is not, we want to replace some things or prioritize some new strategies. So. Traffic signal preemption, yeah, that's a good one. I think that if we can continue with EDC 7, I think I'd like to include that as EDC 7. And probably should have been an EDC 6 aspect. Yeah, the respond to the vehicle alert is part of EDC 6. No idea how we can measure this stuff, but that's why we have these smart people doing the work for us here.
Oh, I see some cost marks on question number 5, which we're sort of ahead of. I just wanted to confirm if that means it is of interest, or if this cross mark means there's no interest.
How do we get that answer from folks? In the chat pod?
We could use the chat box, or I believe folks can unmute themselves too.
X equals no, someone said. Okay.
Yeah, and there's the text box. Correct. There's the text box, and on the Jamboard tool that can be used.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the respond to vehicle, I can see how that might be difficult, but those respond to the vehicle alerts we're finding are collecting a lot of data as well while they're in the alert mode. So maybe there is some potential there. We'll have to chase that down. Okay, has everyone had a chance to respond? Maybe we'll move along. Now we're ready to go. Yeah, go ahead. Nina.
Yeah, I'll lead the next discussion. We are actually ahead of ourselves a little bit here. Question 5 is already under discussion, which is the CDA technologies for TIM, the cooperative driving technologies, and there are 2 pre-populated sticky notes on Jamboard. One of them is responder to vehicle alerts that's using the connected vehicle technology, which would help improve situational awareness and support the move over and Part C laws. And in fact, under Saxton Transportation Lab's other projects, we are developing concept of operations, and our technologies and part of the technologies have been developed already and demonstrated in proof of concept use cases for this purpose. So it is a long shot per se, meaning that it's not readily implementable just yet for large-scale deployment, but it is a potential on the horizon that that could be a useful technology for TIM, and hence that's the sticky note on question 5. And traffic signal preemption, same here for TIM responders. There are already a lot of traffic signal preemption programs in different jurisdictions using existing technology. That could be considered in the TIM-BC tool to provide benefit cost analysis for if jurisdictions that are considering this potential technology are interested in either establishing a program like that or expanding programs or expanding existing programs, especially to coordinate across multiple jurisdictions, because the technologies across different jurisdictions could be different and causing an interoperability issue. Another thought for traffic signal preemption here is, again, with the new connected vehicle, connected infrastructure technologies, new communication capabilities coming in, this traffic signal preemption can be more proactive and can be a two-way communication as well, not just a one-way, because right now it is not a common practice for emergency response vehicles to actually receive confirmation from the signal controller for traffic signal preemption, whereas two-way communication could support that. In addition, if there is such technology in place, then the signal preemption would not necessarily only limit to one intersection. It could be an optimized corridor for TIM responders if the path is already communicated as well for TIM responders. So that brings us to our question number 5, which again have already been discussed, and I see that there's a new sticky note on that. It says vehicle-to-vehicle alerts. Great. I invite all of our participants to continue looking into answering questions 4 and 5, 4 being the next-gen TIM strategies and 5 being new CDA technologies. And I'll leave it open for a little bit here. If you have additional thoughts, please feel free to use the sticky notes or the text box tool on Jamboard, or you can simply type in the chat box here as well. And I'm going back and forth here on my Google Jamboard here, and I also see that on question number 3, there is a pretty thoughtful sticky note saying that these strategies, the existing strategies that the TIM-BC tool supports while they are relevant, but in many states, or in this particular state, many of these have already been implemented, so improvements to these would not be a great benefit. This is great feedback. So it sounds like some of the more established programs may not necessarily need justification over and over again if the BC tools are mostly used for program selection and funding needs. And again, this is very interactive workshop here. If there's any additional thoughts or if my interpretation is not correct, please do use the chat box, the text box, and we will, even if we're not able to get back on this workshop, we will have a copy of the Jamboard tool that we can reference back to, and a copy of the chat history that we could use to compile all the responses to guide us and come up with recommendations for improvements. TIM-BC as part of probe data analysis suite within Redis. Very good. That's a great thought. vehicle to TMC alerts, vehicle to vehicle alerts. Great. Now, I have actually a lot of follow-up questions that I could throw out here, but we'll keep those to open discussion at this point, like what kind of, or states in any, along the line of actually implementing, and where are the stakeholders in that regard, et cetera. And I see a lot of other responses here, additional responses, and TIM-BC as part of TSMO strategies, best practices. So sort of the benefit cost of performing a best benefit cost for TIM analysis. Not sure if that is the correct interpretation here. So if that can be elaborated on in the chat box or text box, or even toward the end Q&A, that would be great inputs to this particular project and to the improvements of the TIM-BC tool. All right, with that, I am going to move forward here. Please, again, feel free to continue using the Jamboard to type in your response or share your thoughts with us, and we really appreciate the great inputs. And I am going to continue on here to discuss our next possible improvement category, which is the usability of the TIM-BC tool. So I'm going to quickly walk through the input screens of the TIM-BC tool using SSP, Safety Service Patrol, as an example, just in case some of our participants have not used the tool or have not seen this tool before. And then we can discuss what kind of improvements can be done to make the tool more more helpful and easier to use. So this is the home screen of the Safety Service Patrol. Here we can start a new project or upload data that has been saved before. And this doesn't mean uploading data from external source. Rather, it means if you've started a project before and haven't completed that, just save the data on your hard disk, and you can load the existing progress of the project into the tool to continue working on the project that the benefit cost analysis project that you have already started. If you start a tool or start a new benefit cost analysis, it will the tool will request you to enter a name for this analysis project, which is pretty straightforward, and it will also allow you to select the state, number of segments of the highway, segments in the TIM program, the study period duration, annual total program cost. For program cost for the Safety Service Patrol, there is actually a button right here. It says calculate that will lead to an additional input page that allows a user to enter detailed cost items, line items for the Safety Service Patrol program. Whereas for all the other strategies that are currently supported by the TIM-BC tool, the cost side of things is just a lump sum number that you enter at this first page when you start the analysis. This page is the main input page. This is where the segment information will be entered, including road geometry, the program information itself. And actually this input page is using the driver removal law, DRL, driver removal law as an example. But most of the strategies, their input pages look very similar. The only difference will be the program side of things right here in the top, in the middle column on top. Whereas the road geometry, which is on the left, the traffic information, which is on the bottom, as well as the incident data, including the average incident duration and number of incidents, etc., would be on the, which is on the right side, and those are all identical. Those are information that would be needed across the board for all the TIM strategies that are currently supported by the TIM BASIC tool itself. And then the benefit cost ratio is calculated by the methodologies that are implemented in the tool, which we'll get to towards the end of this workshop. But it's currently it's sort of like a black box to the user. But then again, there's the required data to use the tool is basically shown here on this page. So then once all required data has been entered, which is indicated by the block headers turning from blue to green. So if all these 4 boxes have turned to green with a green header, then a user can click the Calculate Ratio button, which is under the roadway geometry box on the left, in the leftmost column. And then it will bring up the output screen for the tool, which provides a summary of calculated benefit and cost. And the benefits are provided in terms of delay savings, fuel savings, secondary accidents, emission reductions. And you can also, a user can also generate a PDF report that would have more explanation of the output of the analysis. So that is, again, a quick rundown of how this tool looks like, what each page does, and what kind of input data is required. So which brings us to this question, which is question number 6. How easy it is to use the tool. And here I'm assuming that we have some experience using the tool, or if not, then based on this quick rundown of what the tool looks like, how easy it is to use the tool, or actually how difficult it is to use the tool. 1 being easiest, and we have 5 columns that are marked. You can simply put a check mark in the corresponding block, 1 being easiest, 5 being very difficult to use. And if you could elaborate your answer, either using the chat box or using the text or using the sticky note. We are looking for really what is it that we could improve in terms of usability of the tool. Is it more explanation on some of the input items, or is it better understanding of how it works, or is it different ways of entering required inputs, etc. So I see number 3, number 4. So not very easy to use so far. Help desk function and practical how-to video. Great suggestions. A white paper or tech memo for using TIM-BC or even case studies. Very, very good point. That's part of why this project, as part of the effort, we have developed and updated documentations it's all in our Confluent page. There is a actually user guide document, and there's a project report because this tool was developed several years ago as part of an earlier project. So there was a project report that also has examples of how to use the tool. But I see that the tool itself, there is no way to actually get to those documentations, those help features within the tool. So I do see that being a possible improvement if we are able to build the help documentation into the tool. That would make it easier, so people don't have to go to like several different places to look for information. And how the calculation works is very, very important. That's very important to me, at least. And there is documentation. We, again, as part of this effort, we've cleaned that all up. And in our Confluence space, we have tried our best. We think it's now in a much more digestible manner than the original project report. So that could be something that we also add or consider incorporating into the tool itself. Error message for downloading the tool. I believe when you download the tool, it's a zip file and you have to unzip it first. You cannot just click the shortcut inside the zip file itself. So yes, sometimes those technical details can greatly affect the usability of the tool. Yes, yes. Great enhancement would be a time value money function to see BCA in different years. Very, very good. Current value is $2015. Very good projection. Maybe, well, this is not necessarily a projection just yet, but just saying in different years because of inflation and all. But along a similar line, there will be, to me, I thought about a projection function because a lot of the program selection and benefit cost analysis for funding needs is for future years. So if the analysis could project, say, traffic or other benefits into future years, that would be a great enhancement. Explanation of how benefits are calculated, okay? Again, this is similar to an earlier comment on, yes, we need to know how the calculation works. Input information is not easy to obtain due to the way that we capture our mitigations. That one, if anyone who entered that, who commented on that, wouldn't mind elaborating, we would really appreciate that. We would like to know which input fields are not necessarily consistent with current ways or current practices of capturing data. And so that's, we could consider adding alternative ways of doing so, of entering the same data. Great. Unzipped the file and worked. Glad to hear. And especially, I think the responses are slowing down here a little bit. Before too long, I think I'm going to move on to the next discussion. But I would also like to hear maybe if any of our audience has used both this TIMBC tool and some of the other tools that are mentioned earlier. If someone in the audience has done that, has used both or multiple tools, then it will be of tremendous help to us to get your opinions and inputs on this in terms of what the TIMBC tool is lacking or what TIMBC tool does better, what can be done to improve it, to maybe replicate some of the features that are deemed useful and popular in other tools. A default value that incident durations are reduced on average by 10 minutes with team training. Where do I find the basis for this? Very good question. Well, so there is a default value for these incident duration reductions, and it's coded in the program, and the values are actually from expert interviews conducted several years ago. And those, of course, those values here with the tool, the intended usage here is for users to enter their own values based on domain knowledge of the jurisdiction, of the area, etc. But these data may not necessarily be easy to collect. Explanation of how benefits are calculated. I see that several times now, and I totally agree with the comment that we need this better explained in the tool itself. Okay, so I see, thank you for adding more details on the input information not easy to obtain comment. So some very detailed information is required as to what lanes were impacted. So actually for this one, the tool itself has two ways of entering the expected duration reduction after implementation of the TIM program. One way is to simply say by average, what is the duration? And it applies across the board to different severities of incidents. By different severities, I am really saying by different number of lanes that the incident potentially would block. And that's how it's implemented in the tool. Another way is to enter the expected duration reduction by lane blockage. So if you click on that button, which is in the top middle box on the slide, which we'll come back to in just a bit. If you click on that by lane blockage, then the tool will have the option for a user to enter the expected duration reduction by lane blockage. But if that information is not available or hard to estimate, then a user could go back to the average duration. Develop standardized data capture strategies to maintain consistency in TIM-BCA. Very important practice here. I believe this is also part of the recommendation coming out of the one of the NITA projects on the best practices for TIM-BC analysis. All right. Well, thank you everyone for for your inputs here. Again, please continue to enter your comments as I move on to the next section here, which is data needs and data feeds. The tool itself relies on certain data that are from the users. It also has built-in data from various sources. So these potential values there, one of the comments on question 6, it actually already touched on that, which is where do we get the default value of the incident duration reduction from. So that's a great actually segue into this section of data needs and data feeds. So here it's a zoomed in version of the previous screenshot that we saw in the program information box, which is the middle one that you see here. This is using the driver removal law as an example. So it actually has 3 input fields that are tied into applicable incidents for this TIM program. So it's actually highlighted in a box that says benefit applicable incidents. It has the proportion, it has compliance rate, and then there is the third box down below. I can't really tell what that is right now, but it's related to the, it's a before and after, right. So the idea is driver removal law here, the assumption here is not the driver removal law itself will not be applicable to all the incidents. It only applies to minor incidents like fender benders. So what is the proportion of incidents that this driver removal law will be applicable to? That is the proportion section, or proportion field here. Then there's a compliance rate before, which is before introducing this driver removal law, before any TIM program to support this driver removal law. What is the compliance rate before and what is compliance rate after? So those are the required incidents, required inputs for the applicable incidents. And then there's the duration reduction, which is in fact the core data input that all the calculations will be based on, is the duration reduction of incident duration after implementing the TIM program. And that's actually a user input. And on the right-hand side, the incident information itself is user input, which is what is the average incident duration by lane blockage, and what is the number of incidents by lane blockage. This potentially is something that might be, certain jurisdictions might not have such information. So we would love to hear if there is, if this data is just not possible to obtain, or if there is any initiative in collecting data for that way, or if there are existing initiatives for data collection for TIM that this tool should adapt to. So instead of having to require user inputs in this format, what would be the best user input that is consistent with existing data collection practices? And of course, the secondary incidents is a user input as well in terms of percentage. So that's the required data. This is the benefit estimation, which this is talking a little bit about the methodology, but it will come back in our discussion about the methodology itself. But in the calculation of the benefit, travel delay and fuel consumption and emission, there are other built-in data in the calculation itself, like average gasoline prices, average labor costs, commercial vehicle costs per hour, and secondary incident cost. Those are from different sources such as U.S. Energy, Information Administration, Department of Labor. And then the truck commercial vehicle cost per hour is currently from American Transportation Research Institute. And finally, the secondary incident cost is from a report from National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Cost estimation here, there's a lot of user inputs required. So we would like to hear from the TIM community what can be improved in terms of these data, either the built-in data inputs or the data requirements, the input data requirement that is needed for the TIM to use the TIM-DC tool. Cross connection with Redis data set, which is mostly traffic. I wonder, so I can definitely see some additional analysis going in to cross-reference incidents database and the traffic database to obtain certain values like the duration reduction. And it checks for input like percentage reduction in secondary crashes, perhaps guidance that entry is outside of normal input. So is percentage reduction in secondary crashes, if I understand this correctly, that is not something that TIM communities typically have information on?
Yeah, most states that data isn't necessarily available, but it could be if they collected secondary crash data. Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, it's only in a handful of states that would have good data. Well, more than a handful.
Right. Right.
So
it sounds like one way to immediately, adjust the tool for that is to allow that to be an optional input, and in that case, the outcome, the output of the analysis would not include the secondary crash as part of the benefit, as data is not available.
Right.
Yeah.
Optional are I mean, there are probably ways to guesstimate, if you will. Not that you should be guesstimating, but I mean, obviously there is a reduction in secondary crashes if you can reduce the time on the highway. That's a well-known theory from all of us. I think it's backed up by some data, but yeah, it will probably be optional because it's only available in some states.
Right. Right. Thank you for that additional comment here on the Jamboard. It's difficult to collect percentage of secondary data, or secondary crash data is very difficult to collect. That is good to know.
Not that difficult.
I also see Well, I can see that's how to attribute that crash to an existing crash. At which point do you consider it a secondary?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
fair
a
idea? Yeah.
long-going discussion that, uh, but people do collect secondary crashes. There's a fair amount of common sense that's involved. Maybe not common sense one's good judgment or judgment. Most people know, you can most often can identify when a crash is secondary. Not always, so if you don't know, you don't know. But, if, there is some reasoning that can go into when a crash is a secondary. TMCs certainly have a good handle on that. When a crash occurs and another crash occurs in the queue, it's a secondary crash. But sometimes I think people overthink it, and that's what causes the issue, I think.
Mm. What about other inputs like the duration reduction? Is that something that stakeholders typically have information about? Or is it relying on, or are most users relying on the default?
I think same thing as secondary crashes. Some have it, and others, and some don't. I think probably a smaller amount, or less, maybe 30 or 40% of the people could get that as hard data. The other is a default amount probably would be better. But having it as optional, if they had the hard data, they could put it in, I think would be helpful.
Right. What about the applicable incidents? Is that something that some states or most states have a good estimate on?
Not sure what that is, applicable incident.
Like the driver removal law, it would only be applicable to fender benders, like minor incidents. So do we know what's the percentage?
I mean, that was a really good comment that someone had early on, that it is very difficult. The driver removal is for smaller incidents. They're just if you can move your car, off to the side, that's the nature of the incident. So I don't know how many people would actually collect that, because if you can move it off to the side, necessarily the police aren't necessarily coming at, to fill out a crash report, and then the TMC is not necessarily identified if there's no actions by that TMC. So yeah, I think there are a large number of fender benders which would apply to the driver removal laws that probably go unnoticed. So that was a very good point someone made initially.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
Secondary crash, I'm sure there are some research out there. I don't think the built-in default is 20%, but it is not easy to actually estimate that.
We have more data now. We've had a couple of federal highway projects on secondary crashes. So we have more data. 20% was a number that we never really could hang our hat on. It was from some small studies years and years ago. I used to like that number because it was high, but we're finding out it's not that high, I think, in most states. So the ones that are able to actually have the data and compare it with the overall number of crashes, it's still a significant number, because it's but it's not up around 20%, I don't think.
Right. Somebody commented on it's more about 5. It's more in the range of less than 5, and that's.
Yeah, depending on the state. Again, depending on the state, yeah. But it could in fact be less than 5. Yep.
Yep. If anyone is aware of any published data or reports, please do share with the community. That would be very, very helpful. Also, as we're thinking about these built-in data, I would also like to maybe steer the conversation toward other built-in data, like the ones that users actually don't see in the tool. such as average labor cost, average gasoline cost, fuel efficiency data, etc. So those were actually data that's built in the tool that's from various sources, and they're not necessarily up to date. Would it be helpful to have have those also be user inputs, or actually have the option for users to change those values? That's one possibility. Another being maybe pull the most recent data from various sources. That would be, to me, that would be great if there's a button that says update these default values, update these built-in costs. That'd be great. That's not as easy as actually we're thinking, because it requires a lot of data cleaning, data pruning, and all that, and depending on where the source publishes the data, so the URL could change from year to year. I just wanted to get a feel of what the TIM community thinks regarding these other built-in data that would definitely be a factor in the final benefit cost result.
Yeah, that particular question, Yin-Yang, is when we were developing the tool, or when others were developing the tool, that was always a tough subject, because you'd have to continuously update the tool with the the new data as all those numbers change. So I think it would be good if it was optional, and it's also localized, right? Depending on where you are in the country, the labor rates could change, for example. So having it as an option, or maybe we can find a way to update it periodically once Federal Highway is back for maintaining the tool.
Yeah, I believe TOPS has that as an option. So there is a page that users can go in to change all those default parameters.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
What about on the cost side? On the cost side, with the exception of the safety service patrol, where users are given the option of entering line item costs, all the other strategies require users to just provide a lump sum total cost. Is that something that's readily available to TIM program managers?
Oh, but a lot of them is no cost. Right? The legislation, for example, is no cost. The TIM training, yeah, it did have to. I don't think it would be readily available. That let's say if the national responder training, they would have to estimate it. And I think it needs to be clear to everybody that your estimates still work. If your best guess it sometimes still would give you a benefit cost number.
Great, thank you, Paul. And
I know as a
again,
researcher you don't want to hear that best guess stuff, right?
Well, well, again, I invite everybody to continue commenting on the discussion on the data, either the built-in data or the data that's required for users to enter to use the tool. But given our time here, I would like to move on to start a brief discussion on the methodologies. So again, as before, I would like to just quickly go over the methodologies that are built in, and there are actually several comments on that already. So this would be hopefully a little helpful, and then a discussion on what can be improved in terms of methodology. So this is the same slide that's I have shown before, and the methodology requires all these data inputs because, first of all, the methodology, that there's something called proportion duration-based methodology, which means it requires users to enter the proportion of incidents that's whose duration will be affected by the TIM program. So that's what the proportion, the compliance rates are about. The incident duration reduction is another required input, which in fact is the most important input because all the calculations are based on this incident duration reduction. And on the right-hand side, you need the incident information itself, which again is for the benefit calculation. So there are some questions regarding baseline, and baseline is to because it's the required input is duration reduction. So the baseline is before the TIM program is implemented, what is the duration, which is also a required input as seen in the on the right column in that box. The average incident duration is the baseline. That based on what users entered, that's the baseline for calculation as the before. And after will be calculated using the duration reduction input, which is in this little box in the middle column. So the entire methodology is based on those inputs. And first, of course, one of the major benefit is the travel delay reduction. And the travel delay is estimated using these two equations that are shown. And those two equations are, in fact, regression equations that are developed using simulation data, using simulated data. So the project that developed this tool in the first place several years ago, they developed a rather detailed simulation model itself. It's a microscopic simulation in VISM. And it was various combinations of number of lanes, number of lanes blocked, duration of the incident, traffic volume, and traffic speed. Various combinations of all of that, including gradient and trucks, are simulated. And there are, in fact, thousands of simulations, tens of thousands of simulation runs being conducted at that time. And that data from those microscopic simulation was used to develop those regression equations for travel delay. So as you can see here, travel delay for passenger vehicles and travel delay for heavy vehicles are, they have two different equations, and the factors, or on the right-hand side, the independent variables that will contribute to the travel delay in terms of total hours of all the traffic being affected by the incident, now is a function of number of lanes, the duration of the incident, and the free flow speed, the percentage of trucks, the traffic volume, and the gradient of the road. So these are, so those two are the equations that are developed from those simulation runs and are implemented in the tool for calculating the delay savings before and after. So moving on from here, the fuel consumption is estimated based on the traffic delay. So there is a lookup table produced from simulation runs, and there's also an adjustment based on the percentage of trucks and roadway gradient. And then the emission is based on fuel consumption. So when after fuel consumption is calculated, emission factors, fuel economy, and fuel properties, all those are data from EPA, are employed to then be applied to the fuel consumption to estimate emission. And finally, secondary crashes or just based on user input. So that's, again, a quick rundown of the methodology. So with that, I'd like to open up the discussion here on question 8. what can be improved in terms of methodology used in the TIM-BC tool? Do you see anything that's immediately jumping out to you, or is this a reasonable methodology, or do you see additional needs for simulation or calibration, or maybe transferability of the results for the simulation exercise that was done several years ago to other states, because the simulation model was actually using Maryland data at that time? So I'll open up the floor here and invite all of our participants to chime in here. Right. So type of incident, number of responders. So I believe the type of incident is somewhat implicitly accounted for here in some strategies. For example, again, using the driver removal law as an example, it wouldn't be applicable to more severe incidents. So it will be only applicable to fender benders that only block one lane. In the tool, the SSP, the Safety Service Patrol strategy, that is assumed to be applicable to all incidents. So when users are actually entering the data, that's some sort of nuanced details that users are kind of expected to know how to enter the data to get the most accurate estimate, which again ties back into an earlier comment on providing instructions and in-tool tips and use cases that would be helpful in that. Number of responders, that is hard, again, implicitly sort of currently accounted for in the tool, which is reflected in the expected duration savings or duration reduction. So if you have a larger program with more responders and more resources, so the reduction should be expected, it could be expected to be larger comparing to a smaller program. Lane blockage lane blockage is explicitly accounted for, but that requires more detailed input data. If users have that data, then you can enter the average duration of an incident by lane blockage, as well as duration reduction by lane blockage. Time of day and volume are input values. So time of day is, there are multiple periods in the tool that you can check. With each time period, users are in fact required to enter traffic information for that time period. If you are going to say this SSP program is going to be run only during morning peak hours, then you would only need to enter morning peak hour traffic condition for the benefit cost analysis. If this program is supposed to run in both morning and afternoon peak hours, then if you check both of these checkboxes, there will be multiple blocks of traffic conditions that will come up for a user to enter. TIM factors similar to crash modification factors. Rate suggestion requires a lot more data collection and analysis and research effort. Number of responders is a very difficult stat to get. So this tool, bottom line here is the tool itself uses, the TIM-BC tool here uses a simulation-based approach. for TIM benefit cost analysis. I know there are other approaches out there, not necessarily based on the simulation approach. There's also at a higher level using queuing theory and capacity reduction, so more HCM type of approach. And there's, of course, the more empirical approach, which requires tremendous data collection before and after to obtain benefit. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, be very helpful. And there's a new comment here. Is there a way to incorporate length of resulting queue as a factor? So this whole total delay is based on simulated traffic condition, which is simulated, which would include the slowdown, the queuing, and until traffic dissipates. So I'm not sure if this means the length of resulting queue would be possibly an input, or would it be potentially an output to report as well? Not sure if the time to resume to normal flow is used or if only ICT is used. Saving in delay and traveler exposure to secondary incidents might need to include time to resume to normal, which is, so this tool, when it says travel delay benefit, it's actually talking about time to resume to normal. Whereas the secondary incident is, again, that is actually user input, and it's not directly tied into the time to normal flow. One thing that I see here is the simulation-based approach is a middle ground between the highway capacity manual method versus the very detailed empirical method. So it's a good approach. Some research can be done here in terms of cross-validating using various approaches, get a range of how reliable the estimates are. But that's probably beyond this particular tool. It could be a separate research project. Another thing I can see here is the simulation results, the simulation data that led to the equations that I just went over. Those simulation data came from a simulation model for Maryland Freeway. So there could be potentially some room in terms of simulation for different types of facility, especially if we're talking about local, bringing TIM to local roads. Also, Maryland data may not necessarily translate to or transfer well to other states. So I would like to maybe hear from the TIM community what your thoughts are in terms of the transferability in terms of the simulation model itself. And the methodology is not easy to address per se without a deep dive into getting to know the methodologies themselves. So I will, again, leave it open and invite anyone who's interested to think about it, to continue to comment on it, or consider using the chat box or the phone conversation. But I am going to hand over to Sujit. I just see a sticky note popping up. So quickly taking a look at this. Number of lanes closed varies during the entire duration of the incident. How to determine greatest impact if selecting from more lanes closed for shorter duration compared to fewer lanes closed for longer duration? That's a great question. And I do not have the answer for that because I do understand after having done some detailed looking into existing incident operation data, notes that the number of lanes closed does not stay constant throughout the incident response lifecycle. So how to handle that in the methodology? That's a great question and great something to think about moving forward. So with that, again, please do keep continuing commenting on this and any questions that you may have thoughts on, while I hand over to Sujit to wrap up our discussion and open up the floor for general questions.
Thank you, Yin Yan, and that was a great discussion and a lot of feedback received, and thank you for actively participating in this. Coming to the wrap up, we have during the course of this webinar, we have actually discussed 4 categories, explicitly from updating the team strategies to incorporate that need to be incorporated in the team BC tool, or improving the usability of the team BC tool, or improving the built-in data used in the team BC tool, or improving the benefit cost estimation methodologies. Of the 4 categories here, if you were to rank, 1 to 4, and if there are any others that are not part of these 4 groups, you can put that under other, and you can rank that, and we would like to hear the feedback from you guys to see what is important, what is important in your mind that needs to be updated in order to make sure that we providing what the community needs from the TIM-BC tool. You can rank them by numbers. Okay. I see some populating their preferences here. The responses ranging between different categories here. There's some heavy need on improving the benefit cost estimation methodologies, a lot of ones there. This is some other suggestions like the compatibility and sync with other tool sets. That's a good recommendation there. Are there any examples of other tool sets in your mind that we should be able to sync and compatible? Some mixed responses that are being recorded here. I invite everyone to keep working on your ranking if you have not already entered, and we can move into the open floor for receiving more questions and answers, and I'll have Paul lead that discussion for us.
Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if anyone has anything they'd rather discuss by unmuting yourself, Milo, how do the participants unmute themselves again?
If they press *6, they should be unmuted.
Okay. Does anyone have anything to add verbally? I mean, this was fantastic. So much good input. We have a lot of folks in the TIM community that we can rely on to give us that unfiltered input, if you will. But I notice here we have some folks that may not be from the normal, what we call our normal TIM community. So, but we even appreciate their participation more. So, anything on the unmute? Questions, thoughts? Okay, we don't have to push it. Feel free to feel free if you think of something to reach out to us, and we can. We'll be happy to move on. So I don't think we have to hang out too long here.
Yep, and Paul, we are still having some interaction going on their ranking. I will keep the we'll keep the Jamboard open for a few more minutes even after the webinar. Feel free to enter your inputs during that time, and the link again is here, and whoever is on Jamboard right now trying to feed in some information, that's great. you can keep populating. We'll try to keep that open until 3:30 and then close the Jamboard to collect all the feedback. But otherwise, this has been a great interaction, and I thank you all for participating.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your help with this. Look forward to the new tool.
Add my appreciation to that as well. Thank you, everybody, for your participation and your input. Here, the contact here is our project manager, Govind. But feel free to also leave comments in our conference or respond to the invitation email that you have received from our Saxton Transportation Lab email, or reach out to Paul and Jim to provide your feedback. We really appreciate hearing from you and looking forward to working with you all to improve this tool.